Well, I am Christopher Papin. I'm an attorney, CPA, and licensed insurance agent in Edmond, Oklahoma. Our firm represents small businesses and small business owners because that's kind of who I am. It's what my family has always done. It's what my team does. So we say that's kind of who we are and what we do. So our challenge is kind of in automating the tax return process. Really revolve around kind of the human interface component of life. A lot of people want hand-holding. They want the reassurance that under penalties of perjury, I am doing this right. So we have always tried to lean on the more cutting edge side of adopting new technology or trying to solve that client problem in a more creative or aggressive way. I don't know of a CPA firm, one, that likes to walk people through, please sign here, when you've clearly got a sticky note that says, please sign here. So it's just one of those necessary evils in the industry. And kind of our partnership with SafeSend Returns has been a segue to kind of take that pain point and make it a little bit smaller. How am I introduced to SafeSend Returns is a little bit of a backwards story. It's kind of fun, but we are a tick-tie calculate user, have been for many years, did not put two and two together until a friend joined the SafeSend Returns team, reached out to her and said, hey, you willing to give me the rundown of all the great things that you do here? And within probably 30 seconds of the demo, it was one of those moments where you're like, yeah, we should probably know what this is and learn more about it and find ways to use it. And once we kind of saw the seamless integration, particularly on the client side, but also there's a very user-friendly database on the firm side to be able to manage that e-file process rather than being reactive to that e-filing process, we were all in. Once we committed, our implementation was pretty straightforward. There was an onboarding call with a SafeSend Returns representative, and they kind of gave us the highlights about, how can this be effective for your firm? What's good, what's bad? How do most firms use it? And then there were a series of follow-up calls. I think we did 3 different ones where first step was just try it. Figure out ways that works for you, figure out ways it doesn't work for you. I always tease people about, I promise I'll find a way to break it within the first demo period. But it gave us the opportunity to use it and kind of figure out how inside of our firm we could be effective with using it. And then on our last 2 calls, it was more of are we seeing the results that we anticipated? If not, how do we overcome those? And then kind of a debrief call, if you will. What succeeded, what didn't, where can we lean into some additional training? Amanda was great in kind of saying, hey, here's a couple of articles that I think you and your team could benefit from to figure out how to make this more effective as you go into the spring 22 filing year. Timing on how long it took to actually getting started with SafeSend Returns, I'm gonna say it took us about a week because I was kind of intentional. Being the technician that I am, I like to kind of know the end result before I go through the whole process. But in our first call at the conclusion of, in theory, it was maybe 60 minutes. In theory, we could have sent it straight to clients, but we chose to kind of do some internal testing first, ask questions. That way we weren't learning with our clients, if you will. So impact on our workflow, there's really 2 components that I think are important. The first revolves around client side, which is really what all of this is about. We've used different e-signature products in the past, and there were kind of fairly rigid limitations around what you can, what you can't do. SafeSend Returns allows us some more flexibility that better suits our clients and our firm. And through the use of that flexibility, we are able to more timely get information back. There's also kind of a one place to go solution, if you will, whereas with other solutions we used in the past. Well, if step one fails, now you got to go to step two, which is very different than step one. Not that we couldn't get it completed, but if a person was in e-signature mode and couldn't print, sign, and scan at that point, well, okay, now I got to call you back when I'm in front of the printer. And SafeSend kind of helped us overcome some of those clunky moments of the structure in the past. Secondarily, internal to our team, we kind of manually managed the e-file database previously. And we've got a tax return software that gave us a pretty good indicator of where things were. And then we've also got project management software where we can manage where things were. But the subtasks: has the client reviewed the return? What have they done with that return? Is it the spouse's time to review? Do we need to resend something because it got caught in spam? There's a whole management component that has really allowed us to kind of up our game with our clients and be a little bit more transparent about, okay, we've seen you've reviewed the return 3 or 4 times now. What's going on? Why aren't you signing it? And it creates a different dialogue where sometimes people would just tell you in the past, oh, well, I haven't had an opportunity to do that. And now we can kind of say, well, it appears you've chosen not to. Why? And maybe that's lack of understanding, maybe it's timing, maybe it's confusion, but it has allowed us to have some conversations with the client during that e-filing process. Whereas in the past, we're just saying, hey, we need your paperwork. And maybe that's not the best dialogue right there. Client experience has been positive across the board. In most instances, the scenarios have been very successful. We're using it for both business and personal returns. And in the past, we were not able to send business returns in an e-file environment. So kind of creating that consistency of everything can be e-signed, everything's in a similar spot. There's kind of I call it kind of a dummy-proof click-through system. SafeSend guides the clients, whereas in some of our prior, it's not that the client wasn't guided as to where to sign, but well, what document do I look at and how does that relate back to? And I'm not entirely sure how that whole process played out. It really seemed to streamline that client experience, and in turn also got e-file authorizations back more timely, which cuts down on phone calls and chasing from an administrative standpoint. So putting dollars around time and money are pretty easy. Client retention is always a little bit of a challenging one. Given the nature of COVID, COVID created uncertainty, and then tax return filings, for a lack of better terms, for a lot of taxpayers are uncertain times as well. What do I owe? How do I do it? So our running joke in the office is if you want a client not to listen to you, tell them they owe tax or say the word tax first, and then kind of go through that process. And I think everybody's experienced that. So this is a long way for me to get back to, we don't have to chase. We don't have to read the instructions that say you owe X, please do this. The SafeSend process is more client intuitive to where we're cutting down on a lot of those follow-up calls. Yes, a follow-up call may be a 5 or 10 minute thing, but by the time we did that 2 or 3 times a week over the course of a week or two, then having a client call in and have an hour-long conversation in what otherwise could have been kind of self-guided is a true time saver. Obviously, dollars per hour, insert time times rate is an important thing that goes into that. So there's the calculation piece. The secondary piece about client retention, we are, again, relatively proactive. So we just told people, hey, we're switching to a new system. Give us feedback because we're doing this for you. If you hate it, tell us. And the overwhelming majority thanked us for making the switch. This is easier for us. And I think having an easier client experience, particularly okay, COVID uncertainty, and now I have to write a check for taxes uncertainty because of all the things that were going on in a time where maybe I don't have all the money to pay that. It's a lot easier conversation when somebody's not already upset because they can't click a link. You're talking about the facts and circumstances or the client need or the client fear in some instances rather than the technology, which is a huge win from our perspective. I'm going to go 2 layers deep on this. One is when things did not go as planned, because I promised you early on in this, I'm great at breaking software. Not because I actually break it, but there's always a scenario. We always run into a scenario as professionals where, okay, it didn't quite fit the template. The support team was phenomenal in A, timely response, and B, making sure to check and double check that did you do step 1 without kind of wasting your time, if you will, checking off all of the base level stuff that we all know, hey, you call the internet support company, they say unplug the thing and plug it back in. We've already done that. Move on to the next hit list. So whatever the script is for the support team, they did a very good job of kind of balancing that. Hey, just making sure you hit A, B, and C. If you did, let's move on to the next, so I'm not wasting your time. But at the same time, I need you to confirm these, because if you don't do those in a certain sequence, it won't solve, if you will. So that's one experience we loved. And then secondarily, I'm going to call it the debrief experience. Once we kind of saw the system, saw the process, we were able to kind of interface with Amanda and others within the SafeSend team to say, hey, here's some suggestions, here's some thoughts. Where are you in the process? And in most instances, we're working on it is the answer, which is a cool response. So there's a 2-way interaction there, which is not always the case whenever you have new technology. Sometimes it's just here's our platform, use it. And we like being able to offer the input or know that we're at least maybe offering a suggestion that others find value in. So we can kind of check that box and say, hey, there's one more firm out there that cares about this. Help us when you get there. So I'm probably the king planner. The CPA in me takes over and I like things in an order. So what would I tell somebody that is contemplating SafeSend Returns but wants to do it at a time in which they can be like me? Get over yourself and move on to the next thing, please, because it will make your life simpler. Just like many other softwares that are out there, they specialize. SafeSend Returns is a specialist in making this a seamless process for your clients and creating a database internally. It's a lot of stuff we were creating manually or doing on our own. We don't have to. And when you look at the nominal cost in relation to making, say, 2 follow-up phone calls, or even probably just 1 in the grand scheme of costs in today's world, 1 follow-up phone call that can be avoided pays for the return. So I think, again, get out of your own way, embrace the system, let the system do what it can for you, because there are efficiencies. The one we love the most is you can resend all of the e-file authorizations at once with 1 click. So just little things like that about, hey, we can batch process some stuff that we couldn't do previously is really meaningful to us and huge time savers. So the sooner you get in it, the sooner you can solve those problems. And, again, I'm the planner. I want to know how it works, but I think the client experience is well worth the investment. And so what if 1 or 2 people are clunky? You'll learn from it. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. My ask for somebody in comparing SafeSend Returns to another e-signature solution would be at least take the time to do an analysis, and I'm going to say compare apples to trucks. I know that doesn't make any sense, but frequently software has a lot of similarities to a certain level. Just because you have an e-signature solution does not mean it's an actual solution. It's just an e-signature process. And I like to use Adobe Signatures here. I think there's a lot of people that use Adobe Signatures. It's an amazing tool. We use it in our firm. but it doesn't effectively manage that whole process in the exact same way that SafeSend Returns would be. So we're comparing apples and trucks to those two different products, even though they both achieve an e-signature at the end. So I think looking through that different lens and having an understanding of the ancillary benefits, if there's something that's good, bad, or ugly, by all means, explore it and see how it can work for your firm, because maybe, just maybe, you don't need to recreate that wheel. I know we got rid of 2 Excel spreadsheets that we don't have to use just because we have the SafeSend Returns database that we didn't know about until we went through the process. If you are using multiple tools, SafeSend Returns can automate that process. In our particular case, one of our focuses was getting businesses and business owners in the same spot. Why is a business return a print, sign, scan, and an individual return an e-signature process? Well, those were the bounds that we had with the tools we were using at the time. Being able to have it all the same, all in one spot. You know, as a CPA, we all understand that a business return is different than a personal return, which is different than a payroll return, which is different than everything else out there. Client doesn't care. They just want to sign it and move on to the next thing. So I think creating that consistent environment for the client, again, for the client, is really our driver. And then ancillary to all of that, we figured out there's this amazing database internally where we can more effectively manage the e-file process. We don't have to be so hands-on. I was a stickler about who clicks send. Still, to a certain extent, I don't want something going out the door without the appropriate approvals in place. But same vein, if there's a system or a database that can help you do that and not only check, but double check, why wouldn't you use it? Okay, so cost could be a hurdle. I promise you'll save the money on the back end. We've done enough analysis, and I don't have final numbers on this, but chasing e-file signatures in the spring as opposed to chasing e-file signatures in the fall, which are roughly the same return count, different complexities, but roughly 200 in the spring, roughly 200 in the fall. We cut down our chase time by about 30% because we had SafeSend Returns helping us. That's a rough number, but I think it'll give you a snapshot as to why I would say use the system as opposed to use the manual process there. Our main reason for making the switch to SafeSend Returns was primarily client feedback. Clients persistently ask the question, why do I have to paper sign my business return and not my personal return? Or why do I have to sign in a certain time frame? If you send me a return on Monday at a certain window of time and I've got to get things done before the e-signature expires and you have to refresh that, a lot of clients would say, can you call and warn me so I can rearrange my schedule? Well, there's an extra touch point in there. So we started to see, wait a minute, what are our options to make this more flexible? And I still take professional obligations fairly heavily. Maybe it's the attorney in me, but I look through to what does the IRS actually allow? I have to be able to prove certain components of who signed that return. SafeSend Returns does that for me. I have to be able to have certain files in my database to prove that I, as a paid preparer, met my obligation under Circular 230. SafeSend Returns does a huge component of that for me. So I think when you start to look at the efficiencies that are built into something that's already within a consistent system for a client, we started to look at it and say, well, why wouldn't you make the change, if you will? Now, I fully understand that there are some firms out there that are saying, well, we've got a pretty successful system and we think we're fairly efficient about it. And that's where I would go back to, make sure you do an analysis between what's going on and how can we more effectively manage A, B, and C. We have tax software that is separate and distinct from our e-signature software. And in some minds, that can be a discouraging tool because it's two systems. But the tax software doesn't have the same ability to manage all of the e-file authorizations at the same time. It's more singular than batch process. And we found a lot of value in that batch process. So main reasons really revolve around that client experience. But the minute we saw the software and we saw the ancillary benefits through our preview, we started brainstorming. Wait a minute, this is not a like for like comparison. Let's start shifting in ways that we can more effectively create this experience for both sides. Because who on your team has had a team member say, I'm not calling this person again. I've called them 15 times. I am not waiting past 5 o'clock on the deadline day for them to tell me, I'll get it when I get home. You can do that in batch. You don't have to make that phone call. And there's an internal, mental health moment that goes with that. I don't have to say the same thing again. You can do it in a different way. So I think it's kind of seeing that process play out, and we're excited to partnership with tomorrow's version of that too. We know there's enhancements in the pipeline that are going to continue to make that easier in the digital world we live in. So why wouldn't we? And then I know it's everybody's excuse, but COVID, some people refused, and we needed other options to be able to get them information. So we started exploring other options and kind of opened our mind to different ways. So in a way, it was a great excuse to be a better firm at the end of the day with new tools and new products at our disposal.